Because Indonesia has failed to fight against the racism in Indonesia. The national operation of Papuans themselves will form a Papuan national identity to determine their own destiny. That will strengthen the spirit of resistance in West Papua, joined by the people of Indonesia. I think the Indonesian people start to open their eyes to the people of West Papua, to the operation of the people of West Papua, so that Indonesia cannot hide the operation under the jargon of Indonesian unity, under the jargon of the Indonesian welfare.
Is it on? Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar today. This webinar again is to call for the immediate and unconditional release of West Papuan political prisoners, in particular the 7 in Balikpapan right now. And thank you for Tapol and Ethan to host our this very important webinar today. Tapol is a London-based human rights organization campaigning for human rights, peace, and democracy in Indonesia. And also to Ethan, the East Timor and Indonesia Action Network, a US-based grassroots organization working in solidarity with the peoples of Timor-Leste, West Papua, and Indonesia. And I'm sure that many of you would like to hear comments from Professor Noam Chomsky. I would like to apologize in advance that we asked Professor Chomsky in such short notice that his comments will only be arriving in the next few days, and we will be publishing it as soon as we get it. So our webinar today will be, we will make it in 75 minutes. And the rundown is that we will start with 2 speakers first, West Papuan, former West Papuan political prisoner, and then the West Papua-based human rights lawyer. After that, we will hear we will look at some solidarity messages, and after that, we will go to our 2 international speakers. So for the first speaker, we are honored to, and I would like also to thank our speakers today because you are all willing to do this despite the short notice. So our first speaker today, Filep Karma, he's a West Papuan peaceful political activist, ex-political prisoner, and an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience. Filep Karma was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment for treason in 2005, but released early in 2015. So please, Bapak Filep, silakan. Maybe unmute.
Hello,
Nah,
can
okay,
you hear
yep.
me?
Yes, we can hear you
Hello,
now.
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for uh, participate in this session. Yeah, I have experience 11 years in the jail. I must run for 15 years, but because of you all in the world, in the international, in Indonesia, also in Papua, combined about my case, and that is make big pressure for government, and they release me after 11 years. That's why I say thank you very much for all of you. From the beginning, Indonesia take over the West Papua. The West Papua people, they didn't like to join with Indonesia because they know fairly they have a right to independence, and that's government ready prepare them to the independence in their own self. But Indonesia not uh, give yeah, not looking for West Papua people what they want. But Indonesia want to occupy this land because this land have many things about wood, about mine and everything in this land. And Indonesia didn't care about my people. And in other side, Indonesian soldiers come in Papua. In the beginning, they still intimidate for Papuan people. Um, they use military and police, also intelligent agent, to every time watching for what Papua people doing every day. If in the first time Indonesia come, if some people of Papua, they standing in the road and they still talking, and military or police come and catch them and put in the jail, also kick them. But that is uh, they catch them not follow the rule. And then Indonesian government give uh, uh, penalty for them for uh, for yeah, I mean long long term for them. That is to uh, intimidate West Papuan people feeling, or uh, West Papua people if they want to talk about the independent. That's why government give big penalty for them. Until my time in 2004, they catch me and give penalty is uh, 15 years. After then, because the campaign of you all in the world, and Indonesia, uh, because the pressure of many country in the international, also many of NGO. That's why after then, some of Papua people, if they make some activity to campaign about independence, they catch them and also, give only low penalty. But I think maybe now, because of the so many of people in Indonesia now, they know really what happened in Papua, and many of Indonesian people, they after they know and they change their behavior to support West Papua people. That's why make Indonesian government now maybe panic. That's why they want to give big penalty for the 7 uh, friend in Balikpapan now. That is my opinion. I think that's why, uh, yeah, now they give big penalty for them. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Bapa Filep, for your testimony. And yeah, Bapa, do you, if I may ask, what do you think about, like, after all of this period? Then you were released in 2015, but then we see that these 7 prosecutors are demanding such long sentences against these 7 political prisoners. What do you think about that? Eh, mute, unmute. Unmute. Bapak Filep itu mic. Oh, I see that a Bapa Philip's network bandwidth is too low, it says. So, okay. Maybe we should go to the Bapa. Yeah, so sorry about that, Bapa Philip, but I think it's with the bad internet connection. Okay, our second speaker, before we go to our second speaker, I would like to tell the audience that you can ask questions to our speakers today. Please leave your comments in the comment section. And after the because after the speakers finish, then we will have a Q&A session. So to our for our second speaker, Anum Siregar, she's a human rights lawyer based in Jayapura, West Papua. Her organization is one of the few NGOs that provides pro bono advocacy for West Papuan political prisoners and rights activists. She's also the one of the team of lawyers currently representing the Balikpapan 7. So please, Kakak Anum.
Okay, thank you, Vero. Thank you for inviting me to give some my experience about the legal process for the political prisoners. I will explain about the practice of discrimination of the Indonesian justice system against Papuan people. So as we know, the practice of discrimination in Papua against Papuan people has been around for a long time, since the external existence comes to Papua, such as like religions, government, or companies. They are already wrong assumption about Papua. These assumptions, such as Papua must be repaired, changed, saved, or built, not from the perspective of the Papuan themselves. Therefore, there is already a differentiating view precisely to demean Papuan people. This is the stigma. How the stigma start in Papua about this situation. And now the stigma changed from behavior to the system. I mean, in the Indonesia system. So even though there are policy or like the special autonomy law, which is said the provide protection or respect for the existence of Papuan people, it is inconsistent and always being controlled by Jakarta. So, for example, Papua may have a political party, but it must be approved by Jakarta. Papua may have regional songs or flag, but it must be approved by Jakarta strong. So now how about discrimination in the legal process? So we have many examples about the situation. The criminalization of the movement of youth who use spaces for the freedom of expression. A large number of arrests being held in custody for one day, which the police said they were secured, even though there was no time to be secured. Obviously, it was an arrest. They are identified one by one. Then the leaders are put on the trial. So even they being realized, they are not really free right now. And public and politicization of human rights issues so that Papuan people are easily accused of treason. Talking about the basic right of indigenous people, land grabbing, talk about the human rights violation or law enforcement, rejecting racism, easily being called as treason. While in Jakarta, people talk about the overthrowing power, forming a new parliament, a new state, they are not being processed. This is, discrimination among Papuan situation in Jakarta. And we can look one example, implementation of the multi-article to try Papuans who are considered against the state. Like the main article, we know about the treason, about the emergency law on ammunition or weapon without permission. So it does not give the room for Papuan people to get out of the law, especially democracy activists and young people. And some the problem about the evidence is forced by the changing the police investigation report. The police investigation always change the investigation paper. One day they make the one investigation paper, and the next step they change the investigation paper. Even before someone in arrest, the person is assumed that is being the perpetrator. For example, Buktar Tabuni and friend has not been arrested, but the police said, make the statement, I know the actors. It is like get the article before the law process, before the under justice process. And one of them, we know they have experience about the torture. For example, in Wamena, around January 2016, we heard about the Edison Hesegem was arrested on the police station, and now they bring to the hospital and he died. And then we heard for the Buktar Tabuni and friends, the political prisoner in the Balikpapan, when they were arrested, their eyes were closed when they were beaten. At the first investigation, without the lawyer or the other people, only them and the police in the police office. So we know the violence, the torture become to the political prisoner, not only long time, not only the case 10 years ago, but now for them, for the Buktar, for the Henki Ilapok, and he make explanation in the court, but the judges or the prosecutor deny what happened with them. So we know discrimination will make problem more complicated in Papua. Internalization of the Papua problem and internalization of the movement in Papua are getting stronger. The legal process will capitalize the youth leaders so that at the end of the legal process, they will be much stronger than before. The Indonesia government must realize the situation. They must be stronger than before, both individually or in groups. So no one return to the arm of the Indonesia, or they become to the good citizen of Indonesia. So instead, more of them are being more away from the Republic of Indonesia. And for me, the Indonesian government must correct this bad behavior and system. So the existence of the indigenous Papuan must be respected. Gathering and expression space must be opened. The legal process must be carried out in the professional manner. Everyone must be equal before the law. I think enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Kakak Anum. So several takeaways that I think that very important need to be highlighted is from Kakak Anum is that so the discriminatory treatment against West Papuans is first like West Papuans cannot say anything about their human rights. The state will simply just say anything what West Papuans are saying are treasonous. They are subjected to these treason articles. And then second one is that there is no presumption of innocence towards West Papuans. Like Kakak Anum gave an example how the police chief at that time already said that Mukhtar Tabuni is the actor behind the uprising without a due process of law. And then another that West Papuans often be subjected to violence and torture, and no lawyer provided during investigation. And finally, that this the treatment by the Indonesian state will only make the movement stronger and then deepen the wound, which then makes the bigger gap from Jakarta to West Papua. Thank you, Kakak Anum. That's very insightful. So please leave your question at the comment section in the YouTube or Facebook that you're watching. And before we go to our international speakers, let's see some solidarity messages for this for the Balikpapan 7. So West Papuans across West Papua and also outside West Papua have been announcing their solidarity towards the Balikpapan 7. These are the from this morning alone, we have a religious leaders in West Papua expressed their call for the immediate release of the Balikpapan 7. And also the communion churches of Indonesia also have called for the same demand. And right now, today actually, that we have solidarity from many student associations across Indonesia. This is actually a new what is it called? Like the movement is actually getting bigger, just like Kakak Anum highlighted before. And we would like to acknowledge that new solidarity from Indonesian people, not just West Papua. And next, we are going for the third speaker. Sorry. Our third speaker today is Eben Kirksey. He's an academic at both the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, and the Alfred Deakin Institute of Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. He's an activist and long-time advocate for West Papua. Please, Eben, thank you.
It's a real honor to be here amongst real human rights leaders and visionaries from West Papua. I think in situations like this, in situations where there's intense repression, where there's genocide, where there's ongoing discriminatory treatment targeting indigenous people, targeting Black people, it's easy to focus on the violence. It's easy to focus on the intensity of the oppression. But what I'd like to do today is really celebrate the transformative visions, the ethical principles, the freedom dreams, the very expansive imagination of intellectuals from West Papua, like Filep Karma, as well as Black intellectuals here in the United States. So this week in the United States, we've seen an unprecedented outpouring of support for Black Lives Matter. You know, this is a campaign that has its roots in the civil rights movement. We have civil rights leaders, African Americans, who are in positions of power now. And when I first met Filep Karma more than 20 years ago in 1998, I actually didn't meet him, but I heard of him. I happened to be in Biak the day that there was a flag raising. And at that moment, Filep Karma was calling on the Papuan people to use tactics of civil disobedience, to use peaceful tactics of protest, to call for a reckoning. You know, Filep earlier talked about the unhappiness from the initial moment of the Indonesian military invasion, the unhappiness of the Papuan people under this condition of military rule. And in 1998, he had the courage to demand in a public place an accounting for that violence and he had the boldness to imagine a new future. This week, I've been thinking a lot about a book called Freedom Dreams by Robin Kelley. And this is about the history of the Black imagination in the United States, a vision of transforming relations of power, political relationships, so that the oppression in the United States does not continue. And Robin Kelley in that book talks about, if you just look at political movements of African American intellectuals in the US on the basis of a narrow idea of success, they haven't been successful in the sense that the basic power relations that they've sought to overturn haven't changed. You know, we still see Black young men and women being killed by police in the United States of America. This is what the protests this week are all about. But Robin Kelley insists that we hold on to the transformative visions, the political dreams of intellectuals who are participating in these struggles and inspiring future generations to struggle for change. So I see Filep Karma's legacy, you know, in that broader history of Black intellectuals who are aspiring for something that seems impossible, for liberation from these extremely repressive military and police tactics, from legal systems that don't treat them as being fully human before the law, something that Anam Surigar was just talking about. So these young men that have just been sentenced to extraordinary sentences, and you know, for peaceful demonstrations that brought people to the streets last year, rallying behind the cry of Black Lives Matter, rallying behind the cry of Papuan Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter. These young men have that same revolutionary vision, a vision of an indigenous future that doesn't involve a perpetuation of the contemporary relations of power. So it's that ethical vision, those beautiful freedom dreams that I want to hold on to and celebrate. So here in the US, when Filep Karma was first in prison, it wasn't really noticed. You know, the first time following the flag raising in 1998, power was functioning predictably here in the US. You know, there's heavy investment. The largest gold mine in the world, Freeport-McMoRan, is heavily invested in the status quo of the Indonesian military rule in West Papua. We also have British Petroleum there. So the power brokers in Washington, D.C. don't want to hear about civil rights activists, don't want to hear about Black intellectuals that aspire to reconfigure the relations of power. After he was arrested a second time for waving a flag and raising a flag along with Yusak Pakage, people started to notice and started to recognize that, you know, these same principles that animated the civil rights movement here in the US, principles of nonviolent civil disobedience, that these are universal values that we want to celebrate, that we want to support worldwide. So after Filep was recognized as an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience, after organizations like Human Rights Watch, Freedom Now, the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Human Rights took up this case as one to champion, power relations started to shift. And you saw senior members of Congress, of the Congressional Black Caucus, like John Conyers, someone who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, someone you know, who had profound influence as the longest serving member of Congress. He became the Dean of Congress, along with other members of the Congressional Black Caucus, like Donald Payne, like Eni Faleova Vega. We saw these African-American leaders become champions of this vision of freedom in West Papua. And I think right now, the time is ripe for a similar campaign. We're at the beginning, you know, in Washington, the forces that sort of structure US policy towards Indonesia are very much invested in the status quo. In London, a very similar story, in Geneva, in Canberra, but also in places like Beijing, Jakarta. You know, these elected officials and centers of power have an opportunity right now to listen to stories that seem marginal but are utterly important. So, you know, in this week, as people gather in the streets here in the US, and in a moment that very much echoes what happened last year in West Papua, when people are simply asking for police brutality to end, for the arbitrary detention of activists to end, for the punitive sentencing, you know, 17 years in jail for participating in a peaceful protest, is ridiculous when viewed within the frame of international human rights law, when viewed, you know, in this legacy of nonviolent civil disobedience embodied by Dr. Martin Luther King, embodied by Mahatma Gandhi. So these student leaders who are imprisoned just this week, you know, I think there's a real opportunity for the international human rights community to come together around their case. There's an opportunity for intersectional political organizing on national levels in Indonesia, on international levels, as indigenous lives matter with renewed importance here in the US, as Black Lives Matter becomes a mainstream issue. You know, there is a real new opportunity for international solidarity. And I think, you know, people who are in positions of power, the Congressional Black Caucus remains a very powerful force in Washington, D.C. You know, even amidst the current administration, that the White House has hate speech emitting from it. There's white nationalist movements that are gaining ground here right now. But even in this precarious moment in US history, I really think there is a profound opportunity to do that work similar to what we did with the case of Filep Karma, to unite behind these young men who have been given unjust sentences. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Eben. That's a very insightful, and yeah, like what Eben said actually today. Why also we invite Bapa Filep Karma, it's because it reminds us, like, we thought that we have moved on when Bapa Filep was sentenced to 15 years and then he was released early. I remember that Bapa Filep maybe can say about this more, but I remember when Bapa Filep was released, Bapa Filep said that and the Indonesian state forced me into jail, and the Indonesian state also forced me out of jail. Like, yeah, I remember that bit. Yeah, so it's as if like we are starting again. Indonesia is going backwards because now the Indonesian prosecutors are seeking 17 years and 15 years against two people, all for their political activities. And now we go to our last speaker, last but not least, Peter Tatchell. He is London-based, UK-based, and has been campaigning for human rights, democracy, LGBT freedom, and global justice since 1967. He and his foundation, the Peter Tatchell Foundation, are longtime supporters of West Papua. We are very honored to have you. Please, Peter.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's a great honor to join you with such a distinguished panel. And I'm very, very glad to have so many people joining this webinar to hear the struggle, the battle for West Papuan rights and freedom. Of course, this webinar takes place in the context of the global Black Lives Matter protests. And of course, in West Papua, that is ever, ever so relevant, given that Indonesia practices systemic racism against the indigenous peoples of West Papua. Now, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it has to be Black Lives Matter in every corner of the world, including West Papua. And we need to build a movement of solidarity right across the globe to support those heroic, courageous, brave, and inspirational West Papuans who are taking a stand against Indonesian annexation and occupation. They are awesome. I salute them. I am so honored to be able to do something small to support your just struggle. And believe you me, it has been a long struggle, but you will win. No tyranny lasts forever. Indonesia will have its fall. Adolf Hitler promised the Third Reich lasting 1,000 years. It lasted all of 12 years. Indonesia's been occupying West Papua longer than 12 years, but believe you me, its day will come, a reckoning will come, and West Papua will be free. When we look at what is happening in West Papua today, Indonesia is violating its own human rights commitments. It has signed up to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It signed up to the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights, which guarantee freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of association, the right to protest, the right to free speech, protection against torture, detention without trial, and extrajudicial killings. So Indonesia is standing in violation of the very human rights agreements that it itself has signed and pledged to uphold. We need to have Indonesia held to account. We need to ensure that Indonesia abides by those declarations in terms of not only the people of West Papua, but all the people of Indonesia. One of the big problems we have is, of course, the shame and disgrace of Western complicity in Indonesia's tyranny in West Papua. Indonesia is supplied arms by Western countries like the United States, Britain, the Netherlands, France, and Germany. The question is, why are we selling arms to a tyrannical regime which is abusing West Papuan people? We've got to call for an end to Western arms sales, to cut off those instruments of oppression that are being used against the people of West Papua. We also need to begin a campaign, or extend a campaign, because it's already begun, but extend and expand the campaign against Western companies who are exploiting West Papua's natural resources against the wishes and without the consent of the West Papuan people. I'm talking about BP, Rio Tinto, ConocoPhillips, Freeport McMoran, Queensland Nickel, and Nippon Oil, just to name a few. These Western companies are taking advantage of Indonesia's military subjugation to rip off the natural resources of the people of West Papua. We need to begin a boycott and sanctions campaign against those companies. And you know, we can have an effect. We all, I think, are familiar with the success of the global anti-apartheid movement with its campaign of sanctions, disinvestment, and boycotts against apartheid South Africa. Of course, the struggle there was won primarily by Black South Africans and their allies. But the international campaign really helped turn the screws on the South African regime. And I believe we can do the same with Indonesia. I think also we need to press for the United Nations to send a fact-finding mission to West Papua, to get a UN rapporteur to go to West Papua to investigate and report to the General Assembly and to the Human Rights Council on the violations of human rights in West Papua. We also need to press Indonesia to lift entry restrictions on human rights defenders and journalists who are currently barred from entry into West Papua. And finally, we need to ensure that Western aid to Indonesia is conditional on respect for human rights. We cannot give a blank check to Indonesia. We have to insist that if they want aid, that it has to be conditional on the respect of the human rights of the people of West Papua. I'm not suggesting that all aid should be cut, but certainly it should be perhaps switched from the Indonesian government to NGOs that do not discriminate, who are not implicated in the oppression of the West Papuan people. Now, I haven't got all the answers, but those are a few ideas that I think are worth considering. They're being applied in many other situations. I mentioned apartheid South Africa, but many other countries as well with success. My final point is just to reiterate my heartfelt solidarity with the people of West Papua in your long, arduous, painful, but heroic struggle for freedom. As I said, you will win because no tyranny lasts forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's very powerful. The call for international solidarity. And I personally think that it is very important because if Black Lives Matter can sweep across the globe, it means like human rights is a universal value, and international solidarity is possible. That also Amnesty International has described West Papua as a human rights black hole. So it really needs international support. Thank you, Peter. Now we go to question and answers. There's many. There are many, and we would like to hear from Bapa Filep Karma first. First questions for him because hopefully that he's got a better connection now. Bapa Filep, if you could unmute. Oh, sorry, I haven't asked the questions. Okay, the first question, Bapa Filep. Is it possible for Papuan human rights to be respected as long as Indonesia controls the country and people continue to struggle for independence? Unmute dulu Bapak Filep. Nah, yeah.
Now is for Papuan people very difficult to make a peaceful demonstration. If we arrange a peaceful demonstration, police didn't allow us to make action like that. For example, for six times I make a letter to police for inform them about uh, make kamisan action in Jayapura with Mrs. Anum also, but police didn't allow us to make a demonstration, peaceful demonstration like that. If someone want to make a peaceful activity like demonstration, police ready stay uh, in the some point in the road uh, for barrier them, not for action like that, and say them to not make a action like that.
Yeah.
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 Like
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Bapa Filep was saying that there's simply no way, no space for West Papuan to be able to speak. He was giving an example of Kamisan. Kamisan is a nationwide, but mainly in Jakarta, a peaceful protest on every Thursday. Kamis is Thursday, and it's now almost I think it is the almost 500, more than 500 times already every Thursday. But so Kamisan can take place in other than West Papua peacefully, but in Jayapura in West Papua it is prohibited. So that's how discriminatory the treatment is. And Bapa Filep also raised about Facebook posting. I would like to remind you that from the there are 46 political prisoners charged with treason right now in West Papua. One of them, Asa Aso, currently detained in Jayapura. He's being detained for treason over Facebook posting. So Facebook posts as treason. That's how West Papua cannot speak. And Bapa Filep, if you don't mind, again, a question for you. Bapa, here Bapa Filep talk about your experience studying in the Philippines, how it affected your understanding of Indonesian racism.
yeah, the time I'm studying Philippines, that is the first time I feel, oh, another people they see me like them, not any racism. But in Indonesia, the time I study in Java, oh, very racism. But I think only in I mean in the time during the I study in Java, maybe now is more democracy in Indonesia. Maybe some people in Java didn't do like that. But after then, I asked for some student in Java after I released from jail. But they say, oh, Bapa, this is, they say, oh, father, not change. We also, every day we have a experience about racism like that. Because some people in Java, something is bad for us, like from they ask, they say something like that. They say monkey or like that. That is, I think, oh, from 1970 until now, people of Indonesia, not almost, but maybe in some area, they didn't change their mind. They didn't. They didn't think, oh, people, black people is same with us, but black people is different. There is nothing like that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I have one personal question, Bapa, before we go to the questions to other speakers. So when you were released, Bapa, in 2015, and President Jokowi at that time also released five other political prisoners. And then for 2 years, 3 years, we don't have newly detained political prisoners charged with treason. But right now, we have, in the wake of the uprising, we had 56. Right now, 46, because 10 have since been released. What do you think about that, Bapa, as a West Papuan? As a West Papuan, do you think that, oh, for some time I thought President Jokowi has good faith about us, or it never occurred to you, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, that is make me to have a question mark in my mind, because the time Mr. President released five of my friend in Jayapura prison, he give appointment for them. This is feast, but after then I can release all the Papuan political prisoner. He say like that to uh, five of my friend. Maybe Mrs. Anum uh, attending the meeting, then she can heard also what what president say to them like that.
Okay.
But now, yeah, like you say before, we didn't see Mr. President release some political prisoner, but now increase. Also, I remember in Molucas also we have four people from before in Mr. President Bambang Yudhoyono era. Still four people stay in the prison in Ambon in Molucas. We already tell to Mr. Minister of Law, Mr. Uh, yeah, I forget the name. Yasona, Mr. Yasona. He say he can try to uh, transfer them from Nusa Kambangan to Ambon. After then, try to release them. But until now, no. Four people still stay in the prison, in the jail. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bapa Filep. Yeah, so right now we have 10 Moluccan political prisoners detained on treason charges right now. So it's declining, yeah? Okay, now a question to Kakano. What policies, reforms, or steps can the Indonesian government take to end racist violence and impunity in West Papua? This is actually a question for Bapa Filep too, but we go for Kakak Anum first to answer. Kakak Anum, please unmute. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So for me, we hope the Indonesia government to change the policy about the situation in Papua, because yeah, we know when the Jokowi said for the Papua we use the welfare approach, but in fact in Papua it's just about the security approach. So we need to consistent from the Jokowi how to make the bad, how to change the bad situation in Papua to the to respect the human rights situation in Papua. And we hope we think when it's not solution to bring to bring the young people to prison and make the treason because because the demonstration. And we hope the Jokowi make the they have the priority to the respect human rights situation in Papua. I think like that.
Okay, thank you, Kakak Anum. Actually, Bapa Filep, do you have anything to add, or can I go to question for Eben?
Yeah, I think same with Miss Anum.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bapa. Now go to Eben. What more can we do in Australia to help the West Papuan political prisoners? What should we be posting more of on our social media advocacy pages?
So specifically in Australia, there's a campaign to end the joint training exercises that the Australian government has been doing with Indonesian security forces. So for many years here in the United States, ETAN and other organizations were focused on military aid and assistance that the US government was providing Indonesia. So at certain moments, similar to what Peter was calling for earlier, we made particular policy outcomes contingent on the release of this government aid. So right now in Australia, your taxes are going to support the training of Indonesian soldiers and police, and including advanced espionage techniques that are being used to target Papuan activists. You can start tweeting at your MPs, your senators, even the prime minister and the foreign minister, asking about this aid and these training programs, and joining a national campaign being led by Jason McLeod and Pacifica to try to bring an end to this support that, ethically, morally, like how can we imagine a aid program that goes to supporting genocide, that goes to supporting this targeted policing and military violence against Black lives? I also wanted to add something in response to an earlier question for Filep Karma, which is about the promise to release political prisoners and trying to explain like why we have an explosion of current political prisoners. So in the moment when Filep Karma was initially offered freedom, he refused, and he stood in solidarity with other Papuan activists, with activists from Ambon who were also in jail. So there was an intense international campaign to free Filep Karma, and President Jokowi wanted that problem to go away. And Filep Karma refused to let it go away easily. He said, I'm not leaving jail until it's unconditional release for myself, and also my brothers who are being detained with me in solidarity. So I think that incredible leadership from him at an earlier moment, can stand as inspiration to political prisoners behind bars in West Papua. Policy change on a regional and national level. And it's hard to live in jail. I visited Filep on, I believe it was it your 53rd birthday in prison in Abepura? I brought you a cake, and it's not easy to live in these conditions of confinement, but you insisted that this was your burden to bear until there was unconditional release of all Papuan political prisoners. So I think that's why there was this intense campaign focused on a single individual, and that individual had the collective in mind, not just himself, as he was enduring this very difficult time.
Thank you, Eben. That's right. Again, now we are very honored to have Bapa Filep as a speaker today. Amazing leadership indeed. And now we go to question for Peter. About journalistic access to West Papua, especially after President Jokowi announced free. sorry, Let me repeat. I was distracted on the screen. About journalistic access to West Papua, especially after President Jokowi announced free journalism, but in fact, it is still very restricted. What do you think about that, Peter?
I think the Indonesian president made a play that journalists were now free to go to West Papua. But as you say, the reality is very, very different. Most journalists who apply face all kinds of restrictions and technical refusals. Over the years, there have been so many journalists who have been arrested or refused access. Some have gone in disguised as tourists, and they have succeeded, but that was against the wishes and the rules of the Indonesian government. Right now, I don't think we can say at all that there is genuine free access for either journalists or human rights defenders in West Papua. And the very good reason is simply because Indonesia does not want the world to see what is really going on. It knows what it is doing is a blot on the conscience of humanity. It knows that if the world saw what its security forces were doing to the people of West Papua, the world would be outraged. And its simplistic repressive tactic is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Peter, do you think that if there's international access for journalist access in West Papua, do you think that the condition of human rights will be better?
Certainly, I think if journalists were able to go in freely, if human rights defenders were able to have access, if the United Nations were able to send a fact-finding mission there to report to the Human Rights Council, I think it would probably ameliorate, not end, but ameliorate some of Indonesia's worst excesses. But it's very clear that the political and economic benefits for Indonesia in the eyes of Jakarta outweigh honoring open access in order to ensure and protect those political and economic interests. And this has been going on for such a long time. I can remember way back in 1977, I went via Papua New Guinea to meet refugees from West Papua who told horror stories. And I had to do so not only with the risk of the Indonesians on my back, but also in those days, the Papua New Guinea government as well, and the Australian Security Intelligence Organization. You know, the efforts to which Indonesia and their allies and puppets have resorted to try and stop news coming out is extraordinary, and it does continue to this day. And frankly, until we get genuine free open access, I don't think a lot will change. If it does, that access does happen, I think some of the worst excesses may be reduced, but I think Indonesia still has vested political and economic interests that it does not want to let go of.
Okay.
And I think the only way it'll be really forced out is by a huge international campaign. I think particularly forms of economic sanctions, disinvestment, withdrawal of diplomatic status, those kind of things.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, and I agree. I can only imagine if only there were that the West Papua uprising last year was afforded the same access like what we are seeing in the Hong Kong or Black Lives Matter uprising right now. The world can see so many West Papuans want their self-determination. Okay, we are going to our last question. This is very relevant to our case right now. Kakak Anum, actually Kakak Anum, and yeah, from your, Kakak Anum, is there any chance citizens can take legal action asking the authority to review the treason article?
Yes, since 2 years ago, some of the NGO tried to judicial review about the recent article to the Mahkamah Konstitusi, but the Mahkamah Konstitusi rejected our paper about that. Yeah, so we hope the Indonesia will change or drop to the article, but in the very important is about the implementation about the article. If the Indonesian government cannot change the article, but we need the good implementation about the article. The Indonesian government cannot raise the people or the young people about raising the flag, or yell about the self-determination. This is the right of expression. And the point in the Papuan, as long we have the injustice about the law, about the social, about the economy, the people always talk about the freedom, talk about the self-determination. The people always make the flag or the talk about the freedom or referendum every time. Not only in the demonstration, you can read in the book, you can look in the conversation, you can follow in the meeting every time. So this is stigma. So before the Indonesia take out the article, the very important, the Indonesia government, how to make the good implementation about the article. I think this is the point from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kakak Anum. Yeah, if I may add, so the recent article, team of lawyers, including me and Kakak Anum, already submitted the legal challenge to the Constitutional Court 3 years ago, and then the court rejected our petition. But the finding was that the court finds that the Indonesian state still needs recent articles, but the court says in the decision that the law enforcement must be careful in implementing this law so not to suppress the freedom of expression of people. So clearly, this has not been being implemented. Like I said, a West Papuan currently detained in Jayapura over Facebook posts. That's how ridiculous it is. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our webinar, and also particularly thank you our distinguished speakers for being able to speak, to become panelists in such short notice. And I would again thanks Tapol and Ethan for this very important webinar. Oh, and I forgot that and what Eben said, Jason, and in Australia, there's a Make West Papua campaign, Make West Papua Safe campaign, and they're also having a webinar calling for the release of Balikpapan 7.2 on Monday, and they have fantastic lineup. So if you're interested to learn more about this, please you can join their webinar. Thank you, everyone. Good evening and good morning for Ben, Eben.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.